Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Here I am. It's Thursday, August 17th, 2023. Time for another day of saying that it's time for another show. I don't know. I got to come up with some sort of better opening line. Maybe that's familiar to everybody now. And as Scott is always urging me, I ought to be putting that on T-shirts by now. Although, frankly, I still don't understand the whole dynamic of the T-shirt thing. I can't ever imagine buying such a T-shirt, but you never know. But lots of things. I should let you know, by the way, we would be dominating the world. Well, some small slice of it, surely. If I were taking more advice from many of you about what I should be doing to help promote the show. But I don't know. It takes it all out of me to do the 2 hours, and then I kind of want to leave it behind. And, all right, I got some work to do. And I still am considering each day, okay, what can I do to inch myself forward on some of these projects? So maybe in the near future, maybe once we get the college boy number 2 all packed up and off to school and everything, that's my excuse that I've been using to procrastinate everything else. Well, once that's done, of course, I have about 10 other projects that need to be done around the house and whatnot that will probably get in the way of all of that. But I want to let you know I'm thinking about it. 2 more days at home for the young guy on his way out the door. I'm not ready for this. He's not ready for this either. So we'll see how this goes. But that's what's been occupying my mind. Now rising in importance in my mind is I think I must need a new desk chair here. I think the riser on this desk chair, you know, these chairs that, you know what I'm talking about. Your basic deluxe office chair that you can raise and lower, and I guess it's got some sort of pneumatic brake on the thing. I think it's breaking down and all the air is leaking out of it. And as I'm doing the show, I'm slowly sinking further and further down into a less and less comfortable position. And I can't keep the seat height raised. So I guess that's a project for the weekend. So I can't do anything. I can't do T-shirts. I can't do coffee mugs. And how many T-shirts and coffee mugs do people really need anyway? I have no room for any more anyhow. I wouldn't have any of my own, although I expect I'd be stuck with 5,000 of them or something like that. Okay. Well, anyway, I can't get to any of that stuff until I fix this chair or get a new one. And really it is time to get a new one. The faux leather, I guess, on the armrest is also flaking off as things are falling apart. I mean, the chair is probably as old as the show. So I guess give you some idea. Greg says I should just sit on a couple of phone books, but guess what happened to phone books? Yeah, you can't even, I don't know what people put their kids on now when they need to boost them up at the table. There's no phone books left anymore. I'll put Google underneath me and, or a Siri and, see if that works. All right, lots to get to today, although I don't know what any of it is. I noticed that there's 30 messages already from Greg. Let's see, by way of doing the 2-minute version of the show, there's always the messages from Justice Putnam in the morning. Everything's A-OK, so that's good news. Let's see, mention of Joe Biden on his way to Hawaii to, I guess, survey the damage, which of course means, as he says here, MAGA will be complaining it's somehow too soon for him to be doing that. Actually, I'm sure that there are people in Hawaii who are probably saying the same thing, but then there's also probably a huge swath of Hawaii saying, thank God nobody ever comes here when we're actually in trouble. They might come here to vacation, but it's nice to have the attention of the president, I guess, even though they'll be diverting resources, but it's not like the whole state burned. But a significant portion of it, so surveying the damage, and it's usually a prelude to there's help on the way, as opposed to when Donald Trump comes and throws paper towels at you. So at least there's that. And of course, absent the president's focus on it, the Republicans don't care what happens to Hawaii ever. So, okay. What else have we got here? And, the other comment here. Jenna Ellis is selling prayer cloths. Is that right? Is that like the Pittsburgh Steelers terrible towels from way back when? Except this is for prayer to get her out of jail. Perhaps 5 indictments. By 5 indictments, we're getting the 5x5 signal here. that everything is working there. Okay, very good. If you count the superseding one, has there been a superseding indictment? Have I missed that already? I tuned out after I had a meeting yesterday evening that kind of took my brain away, and then it was all just trying to wind down by watching TV. And I did see before. Oh, no superseding indictment, just hope for a superseding indictment, I assume. All right, Greg says no. I did see before giving up on news for the day that Roger Stone now emerges from hiding, I guess, in his role in the attempt to overturn the 2020 elections. We all knew that he had a role in it, but I guess now we're finding out well, what I'm really finding out is that same documentarian that was filming him the whole time that connected him originally to the activities around January 6th has got more footage that's also relevant, I guess, to the investigation. And what was revealed last night on MSNBC, I guess Ari Melber's show, I saw the clip from it, and this is footage of Stone dictating a memo to one of his flunkies. And the tape is apparently dated November 5th, either November 5th or 6th, 2020, meaning post-election, but prior to the network news calling of the race for Joe Biden. So it's still up in the air at this point, although the writing is beginning to take shape on the wall, I think. And there's Stone dictating a memo, basically outlining the fake electors idea, the fraudulent electors idea. I don't think he was necessarily the first one to think of it, but now this is an earlier indication, the earliest indication documented of a Trump operative circulating this idea. And interesting because, he doesn't show up in any of the indictments anywhere. Of course, he's got a pardon for his previous conviction in connection with the various other Trump cases. But I don't know. I was skimming over his pardon, and it doesn't really appear to extend to what would be covered in this case. So I don't know whether it's effective as against this case or whether there's also, I guess, renewed speculation about whether or not there were any sealed pardons and whether or not that's a real thing and can be effective. So, all right, well, it's probably time to dive into the whole bit. But I guess my real question about the documentarian thing is, where's this effing documentary already? This guy has filmed hours and hours of huge crimes that people are being tried for all over the United States, and that we'll see more and more of the ringleaders and, of course, the ex-president of the United States on trial for all of these activities as well. And every 6 months or so, this same documentarian who, I don't know what's more baffling, that Roger Stone said, yes, come and film a documentary of me, even though I'm 24/7 involved in crime. And he said, go ahead and do it anyway, because I guess he thought he could act with impunity, and he loves documenting the fact that he gets away with his crimes. But is that the more baffling thing? Or is the more baffling thing that this guy has all this evidence on videotape and it comes out in drips and drabs? Where's the final product? How long does it take to edit this thing and put it out, for one thing? And I guess prosecutors are getting raw footage, but I'm just amazed that there's anything more to discover in this guy's footage that we don't already know about. Maybe we did know and we just forgot. It's overwhelming, the amount of evidence in these cases. Well, Greg Dworkin is here. We better get to it because there's a lot in the queue. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Good morning. I think we did know
down on the floor here. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the idea that Stone basically advised Trump to say, just screw it, get out there and say we effing won.
That I remember. I mean, we did know that. I didn't. I've never seen this footage of him dictating the fraudulent electors portion of the game. But
what's illegal and what's unseemly are quite different. And I think you'd have to show. I'm not a lawyer, but I think you'd have to show that he was in touch with like Cheeseborough and Eastman and knew about it.
Well, to connect him to this conspiracy, that would be wise.
Yeah, and that's why the Georgia case is so important, because it allows you to do that on a lot less than, this standalone thing is illegal and he should be, booked for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think it'll be difficult to connect him to the conspiracy, even if he's not necessarily in direct contact with Cheeseborough or Eastman. One of the fun things that I remember from criminal procedure and criminal law in law school and having to do with racketeering and conspiracy charges is what did they used to call it? The hub and spoke theory of conspiracy, where so long as there is a sort of a chief operating officer at the hub of the conspiracy,
that would be Donald Trump.
Yeah, then that's enough. If Stone is in contact with Trump, floats an idea, and Trump farms it out to Cheeseborough and Eastman, or says, you should take a look at this.
Cheeseborough and Eastman came up with the idea, told it to Trump, and then Trump told Stone. But you need to show that Trump told Stone part.
Well, yeah, you need to see some connection here, but there doesn't need to be any connection between the various spokes of the wheel. So it's kind of an interesting possibility.
Look, I think the entire Republican Party is guilty.
Yes.
McDaniel and all those folks, but they're not co-conspirators yet.
Not yet, right. But there's hope. And I guess if you are worried about there being solid evidence, every once in a while, it just turns out that Republicans say things like, you should make a documentary about me, this criminal person, and show people how I do my criming.
Is you filming a criminal conspiracy?
Yeah, apparently that happens from time to time. And I guess it's just astonishing. This is probably the third or fourth time that this documentary.
Is one of the greatest memes of all time for
it
2023 and 2024.
It was one of the best shows and a great and relatable scene, I guess, from that show, even though none of us are involved in criminal conspiracies and very few of us document anything, even the totally legal things in our lives. But
well, speaking of facts,
that's just it.
I don't know if you saw this. It was just on the transom, as we like to say.
Yes.
ABC is reporting that former President Trump's promised press conference to refute the allegations in the indictment handed up by Fulton County DA's office is now in doubt. Multiple sources familiar with the matter tell ABC News his lawyers are basically telling him, don't do this.
Yeah, which usually means he goes and does this, but...
Right, but still, that means he loses his lawyers.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And of course, that would go hand in glove, as O.J. Simpson's lawyer used to like to say, with the idea that, Trump was just listening to legal advice.
Yeah.
Except when he doesn't.
Right. Well, there is that. That won't help him very much. And the press conference absolutely couldn't possibly help him. Par for the course for him. There's going to be a major press conference, and it's going to be irrefutable evidence.
Not helping Larry Sabato.
Right.
Because the guy can't stay out of the news.
It was a bold assertion, but he does that all the time, and maybe it'll just be.
I'm not Compton. Let's see if it works.
I'm not canceling.
That's another great meme.
Soon, 2 weeks, perhaps a very short period of time, we'll actually come out with all that. So he had an irrefutable report of some kind that and he promised it was long and detailed and complicated, which is unusual for Trump. But I mean, unless that means long and detailed and complicated, like Jewish space lasers, Italian military satellites,
the menu at McDonald's.
Kind of
There's just so much to choose from here.
All right.
Well, but mostly hamburgers.
Yeah, for athletic champions, because they love that stuff. Yeah.
I want to start with kind of a different thing.
Oh, right.
We're going to look at polls because the polling coming out is just overwhelming, and not perhaps for the top line reason you might think, and therefore worth delving into. But it's not good for Trump. And it's not good for Trump, even though on the surface, it appears to be a tie or a 1 point, 2 point Biden lead.
It's a tie.
But there's a whole lot more than that going on. I want to start with the general overall zeitgeist because I think that it's sinking into a lot of people what's going on here. Simon Rosenberg starts us off. He says, as we look to 24, a few things have changed since 20. The Republicans tried to overturn the election. They ended Roe. There's brand damage to Republicans. It could be significant. Mm-hmm. In 2022, the Democrats improved over 20 in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. The demographic changes, the electorate to 1 and 2 points more Democratic than it was, in 20 for sure. Democrats 23, fundraising is outpacing 19, and I would also add all the special elections have really gone the Democrats' way. So if you're looking at the overall Zeitgeist, it's certainly favorable for Democrats. And Maggie Jacobs had a really interesting Twitter X set of tweets here, which read together as a column. Just struck a nerve with me because it mimics my thinking.
Okay.
He says, I have a suspicion, not a prediction, or maybe it's a prediction, but I won't frame it as such because I like to be cautious.
All right.
The basic fundamentals of American political life have shifted and will continue to shift into 2024, and they're all in the Democrats' favor.
Okay, I can see why you would want to go out on a limb and call it a prediction.
It's Roe. It's the clear lunacy of the GOP. It's the conservative court making multiple anti-left decisions at once. Tying these same decisions to the conservatives who appointed them. It's climate. It's Gen Z and how Gen Z interacts with all the above. I'll write more about this later, but I think those who follow me do know I try to be cautious. I'm still being cautious, but I think I'm right. The fundamentals are changing, and it's of descriptive benefit to say so. I almost think it has less to do with Trump indictments than it does with the interconnected things, Dobbs, climate change, Generation Z. And for the first time in my lifetime, the Supreme Court linking itself so incontrovertibly against several issues at once. I'm not sure how else to say this, but I don't think that disaffected youth voting is going to be like it's been in other elections. No matter how old Joe Biden is, it's not going to be the same. No real predictions. We all have to vote. No complacency.
All right.
They can still win. They're too dangerous to take with a grain of salt, but I feel it to shift in the political atmosphere. And instead of saying, oh, maybe we'll have a Dem primary, maybe we should just start saying, we are stronger than they are.
Okay. Yes. We are.
This I will say. Empirical facts, Republicans are weaker than they should be. Dems are stronger relatively. Subjective impression, something's happening. Cultural, political shift, climate, abortion are drivers, plus the youth vote. Democrats and affiliates can be scared because we have reason to be scared. And by the way, we work better when we're scared.
Okay.
I had pointed this out the other day. You know, Republicans use hate to motivate their base because emotions motivate voting. And Democrats use fear. It's fear of losing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hate and fear. We're doing good.
But we can also accurately describe, even in our fear, the strategic position of the other side. And the most accurate description is they're weak. I'll add that more. We descriptively portray the clear weakness, the greater the weakness will become. Why do we keep calling these weak people strong? Why do we do that?
They keep asking us to do it.
Look at Ron DeSantis. Did he ever display strength? No. People wanted him to be strong. He's a bully, basically. And it worked until it didn't work, like with a bully.
Yeah.
And I propose we use this lesson to address the rest of the GOP. So I think she's got a strong point there.
I think so, too. But like a true Democrat, I think I have a strong point. I don't know. Maybe it's not that strong. I think it is. I have empirical data that says so. I don't want to go out on a limb here, but okay. So we're all,
how's your
assertiveness
training going? Well, I don't know.
Exactly.
I think it's okay. I think it's good. I think it better.
It depends.
It depends.
I'll tell you. Yeah. Okay. Well, good. I think we can all identify with that, unlike Ron DeSantis, whom we can't.
And that's not the same thing as, oh, you're getting complacent. You keep saying we're going to win, and we have to run like we're 75 points down. No, the F we don't.
Yeah, well, that could be exhausting. Let's never lose sight of our
Let's run
goal,
like we're 1 point ahead, which is where we are right now.
It would be nice, you want to try that once in a while.
Polls ending August 15th in The Economist, Biden +1 with registered voters. And remember, these are registered voters in adult polls. There are no likely voter polls but one, and that's from Obama's pollster. I'll get to perhaps next. August 14th, Marist, Biden +1, Fox News, Biden +3, Quinnipiac, Biden +1, and Emerson in New Hampshire, Biden +7, Morning Consult, general election, Biden +2, in Kentucky, Biden -21. Those are the latest polls for specific Biden-Trump head-to-heads. What are they missing? You have to go back to the polls. And let me start with the semaphore from Joel Benison, who is Obama's pollster. A new poll shared exclusively with Semaphore finds that Donald Trump's legal troubles could prove fatal in a general election. Now, this is being said at the time that Biden's only winning by a point here.
Okay.
And it gets to what's really going on and why you have to ignore that for the moment. It's way too soon to do head-to-head polling. The survey may carry extra weight for Democrats because it was conducted by Joel Bennison, the pollster for Obama and Clinton. It finds that 24% of Republicans say the charges make them less likely to vote for Trump against Biden, more than enough to swing a close general election, according to the memo. The poll still finds Trump and Biden tied at the moment at 46 apiece. A small number of defections within the GOP could spell big trouble for Trump in a close race, and as of now, his support from his own party seems slightly softer than Biden's. An AP NORC poll this week finds that only 74% of Republicans would definitely or probably support Trump, and 82% of Democrats say the same thing. I'm not saying this is a slam dunk, Bennison told me. I'm saying he's in a much weakened position than he was even compared to 2020, and he lost.
Yes.
The Bennison Strategy Group isn't the only pollster finding hints of discomfort about the indictments among a substantial minority of Republicans. A Reuters Ipsos poll found 20% of GOP voters didn't believe the charges against Trump were politically motivated. 52% said they would decline to vote for Trump in 2024 if he were in prison. Great question. Sounds like something PPP would ask.
Sure.
A new Marist survey finds 31% of GOP voters think Trump has too much baggage to lead the party.
Okay.
Now, Republicans may vote for him anyway. As Benji Sarlin put it, some Republican voters are either lying to the pollsters or themselves.
That's probably always been true.
However, listen to some of these other polling results. AP was out with a poll. AP NORC. 64% of Americans say they will definitely not or probably not support Trump in a general election. 53% said certainly, and another 11% said probably. This is the poll that's circulating through Republican operatives. And usually Republican operatives are confident they're going to win even when they're 90 points down. This is making them panic. That's the word on the street.
Yes, unless, of course, there's a possibility they'll amend the Constitution that you can win with 40%.
Yeah, well, that's not happening in Georgia, by the way. Kemp and other senior Republicans, the AJC, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, is reporting this morning, have no interest in changing the Georgia Constitution to help Trump get pardoned.
All right. Well, yeah, and they did float that, all right after we said, well, they could just switch who gets to do pardoning.
A state senator from Georgia who said, we got to change the Constitution for this.
Right.
And Kemp said, that ain't happening.
Well, that's nice of them to not do.
Right.
There's still the Proud Boys could come beat you up, but, you know.
In that AP NORC poll, Trump's favorability is 33 and unfavorable is 62.
That's higher. Oh, wow.
62 is greater than 33.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing to learn from that poll. This is fascinating.
Yes.
Also from the AP NORC poll. So this is asking the question. We got 4 different indictments here: hush money payments, federal election interference, Georgia election interference, and classified documents.
Right.
Which of them, David?
Yes.
We have 4 doors. Door number 1, 2, 3, or 4.
All right.
Which do you think the public views as most likely that Trump's actions were illegal? On classified documents in Georgia, the federal January 6th stuff, or the hush money?
Legal?
Yeah, which were illegal?
Which were illegal.
If you're going to ask the public, do you think this was illegal?
Okay, illegal. I thought you were like, well, which one do you think you should get away with?
Which one was illegal where the public thinks that, this is obviously illegal? Which one do you think comes out highest?
The highest, most illegal, I would guess maybe the documents case?
You're right.
Hey, all right.
Ding, ding, ding. 53% say it's illegal, another 16 unethical.
Oh, okay.
Right after that is the Georgia election interference, 51.
Yeah.
Then federal election interference, 47.
Okay.
And hush money payment, 34. You will recall everybody said, I'm glad that New York did this, but it's clearly not the most important case. Public agrees.
Okay. Well, everybody said it, so now we agree.
What interesting, the classified documents is easy. You had stuff you're not supposed to have.
Right.
And you showed it to people and you weren't supposed to.
Right.
That is not hard to understand. It's an elevator pitch. You can sum it up right away.
Yes.
Now, the January 6th case is a little more complicated.
Yes.
And the Georgia election interference is incredibly complicated. And yet, to my thinking, the combination of telling the whole story with the RICO charge and laying out, it started with his first speech. It went through all this other stuff, and then in capital letters, the phone call to Brad Raffensperger that everybody knows about.
Right.
People understand you shouldn't be doing that. This is threatening people with, violence, Ruby Friedman and Shane Moss and other stuff, plus doing a whole bunch of stuff you shouldn't have done, and it involved a whole lot of people who were helping you, and you were at the top of it. So people understand. 51% say that was illegal.
Yeah. Well, they're right.
Federal election interference is a more complicated story. Jack Smith was much more terse, and that comes out as 47, and the hush money payment only at 34.
Well, they should raise it up
now, another
a little.
38 said it was unethical,
Sure.
but they're not going to prevent Trump from being president over hush money stuff. Access Hollywood didn't do it. America is simply not in the mood to punish somebody for being a complete ass. That's not good enough.
Although they still have a chance to tell a pretty good story about it. It's not what he was doing with the porn star so much as it was the cover-up. It's really the cover-up story.
They say it's all linked in with
they don't see
Carroll
it that way yet because
Stormy Daniels. They don't want to know about
their story.
So I know about the stuff. I know he's a cat and a bounder, and just don't tell me that.
A bounder? Okay. Yeah. Wow.
But overthrowing democracy and stealing my vote, that's important. And the classified documents, that's classified. You can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can't. And, all right, it's up to the prosecutors in New York to remind everybody that it's actually kind of the same charge. It's you didn't get a chance to vote on real, actual information about what was going on and actual information about his campaign
Trump
finance.
is not going to be able to run from any of them.
Right. Okay. They're all there. So that's nice. And I'd like to see him convicted on all of them. And let's do the hush money last and just say this is just going to add a couple extra years to prison.
He didn't do nothing. That's 14 to 21%. Low.
Oh. Well, yeah, that's not going to help you very much. Okay. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support.
That's the two things.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. The two things. What's the two things? Everybody else comes in and says, what do you mean, what two things? Do we want to talk about that? Or did you say, preface that conversation saying, I wish I had more information about it so I could talk about it? But
I wish I had more information so I could talk about it. But there's a whole lot of discussion about what's going on in Georgia in regard to whether or not this moves to a federal rather than a state venue. And the only two things that really change is a slightly larger jury pool and no televised trial under a federal system. They also get an Obama judge named Jones if that happens.
Judge Jones.
The question on the table is, should Fani Willis say, okay, fine, if you want to do that, I don't really care.
It shouldn't.
You want to move away from a Kemp judge to an Obama judge? I'm just going to say, look, I'm just trying to follow the facts. I don't really care what venue we do it. My case is strong enough that it'll work.
Okay. I mean, we'll see whether any of these excuses help them. I think that they were hoping to move to federal jurisdiction and then change
venue to
venues
Idaho,
as
but
well.
that's not happening.
But yeah, I don't see how they get to that. And
we don't even know that's going to succeed. But I'm just saying,
that's true.
As we said the other day, Meadows has a stronger case than Trump does. But if Meadow moves, the whole thing may move. I don't know that they're going to try it twice or break him off.
Well, I'm not certain. We'll have to see how that plays out and what kind of excuses he's got. I suppose they could move it to. I mean, I think what
in
they
any
could
case,
do
she
is,
wants to go in March.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yes.
And so what that means is January for Jack Smith. Basically, he's going to be on trial every week until the election. And so, from my point of view, his day job is going to trial, and then he can campaign on weekends.
Yeah, I guess so. If the trial begins, my guess is that their usual pattern is to do everything they can to delay the start of the trial. So there'll be a million motions.
But with the January trial for Chutkan and the January 6th case, he's doing everything he can to convince Chutkan maybe I should do it as soon as possible, like early morning, 5 a.m. January 2nd.
Oh. Well,
she's not going to put him in jail over his comments over her.
It's getting close because apparently
she may move up
police have to visit everybody, and they're now visiting people who are already lodging threats against the judge.
And this is all background. This is in the news every single day from now until the election.
True.
That's why I'm saying the Zeitgeist is just so different. Here's AP again. In a crucial warning sign for the former president and his supporters, Trump faces glaring vulnerabilities heading into a general election. This is not both sidesing it, guys. With many Americans strongly dug in against him, while most Republicans, 74%, which leaves 26%, a large number, say they would support him in November 2024. 53% of Americans as opposed to Republicans, say they would definitely not support him if he's the nominee. Another 11% say they would probably not support him. We know that. But the findings bolster the arguments of some of Trump's rivals for the Republican nomination who laud his tenure as president but warn he can't win in a general election. Question on the table is, does Christie go nuclear during the debate?
Well, what else?
He's the one that's most likely to. Pence is already saying, look, let's not weasel about this. I'm losing, and I'm not going to win. Let me just tell you, when Trump says that I had the power to change things on January 6th, he was wrong. All the people that wanted me hanged were also wrong.
I hope he has it in him to say that. Well, if you wanted to murder me, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah, I think it's wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Right, yes.
My assertiveness course tells me that I should tell you that I think it's wrong.
Yeah, this is what happens when you if you give Trump or Pence a thread reader a compilation of what he has to say. Okay.
Right. And then, of course, you can skip all of the total survey says and just look at the independents. This is AP Norc. Half in USA Trump acted illegally in election cases. But for the Georgia vote, 41% of independents say he did. And in the U.S. Capitol, only 33% of independents say he did. The rest say it was unethical. And so, again, in this particular case, you actually have the Georgia situation being perceived by independents as more serious and obviously more illegal than what happened on January 6th. Now, I'm guessing people just aren't paying that close attention, but the enormity of having that phone call from Raffensperger just out there from the January 6th committee and their work to now has made a huge difference in how people look at Georgia. And that's one of the reasons why the Georgia Republicans want no part of trying to defend Trump, not the state level, county level people. I'm talking about the high officials, Brad Raffensperger, the head of the Georgia Assembly, who was one of the people that Trump tried to pressure.
Sure.
They don't want any part of him.
Well,
ABC News poll
out
today. In a week where former President Trump was indicted for a fourth time, a majority, 63% of Americans, say the charges approved by a grand jury in Georgia are serious.
2 of them. Yeah.
Or somewhat serious, 47 and 16.
I mean, they are.
They are.
So the end.
So,
okay.
I mean, you can't go away with, oh, this is nothing.
You shouldn't.
You can't.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
and Trump's Fox
maybe.
News poll out.
Yeah.
All right.
Fox
Trump's
News.
efforts to overturn 2020 election results. Fox News.
Yeah.
And let's just do the independents here.
Okay.
Trump's efforts were something illegal? The independents say, yeah. 62% of them say, yeah. What he did was illegal. 62% of independents.
Yes.
Independents decide elections.
Well, if you ever had any doubts about whether or not independents are embarrassed Republicans, 62% of them are.
As Claire McCaskill said, we're not in a third world anymore. Mm-hmm. That was your father's political environment. It's now 25, 50, with 50 being the independents.
No. Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why the polls are getting everything wrong. They're not waiting for Gen Z, and they're not waiting for how big the independent pool is. That's my opinion.
Waiting.
And if you did those things as you get closer to the election, you'll find, Biden's doing a little better than we thought. But in any case, 62% of independents think what Trump did to overturn the election is illegal. And another 22% think it was wrong. Not illegal, just wrong.
Yeah, that's just wrong.
That's 84% of independents. And you're telling me Trump's going to win because he's going to convince the people not voting for him to vote for him?
Well, they might want their taxes lowered. So
they didn't vote for him in 20, and why are they going to do it now?
Because something. Taxes.
Now, interestingly,
in
the Fox News poll, people still think that the Department of Justice is motivated by partisan politics.
What?
Half of them. 51.
Well, yeah.
46% say no. But it was still illegal. People cannot get out of their head the idea that if a Republican does something and a Democrat says that's wrong, that's politics.
Yes.
Can't get it out of their head. What if what the Republican did was, in fact, wrong? Well, I agree it was wrong, but the Democrat shouldn't be saying that. Well, the funny thing is...
Yeah, that's why we keep appointing
all the witnesses are Republicans!
Yeah, and so are all the special prosecutors.
And the DOJ, the January 6th committee and the DOJ were very careful, both of them, to point out our witnesses are all Republicans. You can't use that. I don't think people understand that, and I don't think it's floated down to the general public yet. But one of the things about having the Georgia thing televised, which is why I hope it stays in Georgia, is you'll have a parade of Republicans coming out and saying, Trump did this. Yeah, Trump did that. It's wrong. Trump did that. He tried to do this to me.
Yeah.
And it's not Democrats. And I think that's what, a lot of normie voters need to hear and see in order for it to sink in.
Well, they ought to put that on if they televise the trial, they'll put that in. They should put in little chyrons, where they put. If you're a politician, they stick that in there all the time, especially if they can hang something on a Democrat. But they put the little parenthetical D or R. They should do that for the witnesses.
Well, there's a couple of polls out that basically showed that if you ask somebody, do you think this is wrong, and they say yes.
Yeah.
If Trump did this, do you think it's wrong? And they say no.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just concrete examples of that.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, you're going to get the reflexive, well, it's my team, so I have to support them. But here's Marist, different poll altogether, fielded August 11th through 14th prior to the announcement of Trump's indictment in Georgia.
Okay.
Okay. And this is national adults, not registered voters.
All right.
And this is one of the most interesting stats of all the different polls that came out. For Trump's 2024 presidential bid, he's been indicted by several grand juries, says the question. From what you've read or heard about these charges, do you think he should drop out of the race or still run?
Yeah.
52% say he should drop out.
Hey, that's a lot.
That is a lot. How do you win with that?
I don't know. More than half of the electorate is saying
why I'm
we
saying
disqualify him.
I don't care that
outset.
Biden is winning by only a point. That's missing the whole concept of what's going on here.
Yeah, there's a lot missing. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I guess if you poll in one place and say, well, do you think he should drop out? Yes, sure. Okay, fine. But in the other poll, they say, well, given that he hasn't dropped out, which one of these two would you vote for? Are there still people? It's two different polls, but I guess there's still got to be a number of people saying
Republicans lie to pollsters.
Or to themselves.
Or to themselves.
I think he should drop out.
Some of them will vote for him. Some of them
are
are not going to vote for him, but they'll be damned if they're going to tell a pollster that.
Could be.
You'll use it on MSNBC. I'm not having that.
Yeah, and that's liberal. So cut that out.
This is the Quinnipiac poll. In the wake of a federal indictment accusing former President Donald Trump of attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election, Americans 54-42 think Trump should be prosecuted on criminal charges.
Well, that's
54-42.
Good because it is happening.
That may be how the election turns out, 54-42. Democrats, 95%, and independents, 37% think the former president should be prosecuted. Independents, by a 20-point margin, think he should be prosecuted. Now,
well, he should.
Do you think that all of these trials will take place and finish before the election and Trump will be exonerated? You'd have to think that, oh, none of it matters. Or it's helping Trump.
Yeah.
That's not reality.
No way. No, but I guess I don't know. Are there people clinging to that as a hope?
Sure.
Amazing.
Those are the same people saying, yes, but all these polls show Biden only winning by a point. You're not getting it because you don't want to get it.
All right. Well, yeah. Sometimes you just don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
It's morning, whatever. Monday,
so Catherine
no lasagna.
Who is a historian, author, associate professor of history at Northwestern, had a tweet which was challenged, and so she wanted to get into it. And I thought it was really interesting to step back and look at the bigger picture here. What she tweeted on August 15th is that RICO's done a lot to dismantle organized white supremacy. That's all she said, and people challenged that. And she said, it was an incomplete thought, so here's the rest.
All right.
In the 1980s, RICO was one of three main mechanisms used to confront white power organizations attempting to use cell-style terrorism to overthrow the U.S. and harm targeted Jewish, LGBT, and people of color communities.
Oh, that's relevant to today.
RICO is how they prosecuted members of the order, that's capitalized, in the 1980s, for instance. The second main mechanism was civil lawsuits like the Southern Poverty
Law Center.
Law Center?
I think it's
Legal Center, SPLC. Versus the Klan. And the third was a seditious conspiracy case, which depended on the evidence and plea bargains of RICO prosecutions. And all of these tactics were, of course, reliant on policing and incarceration as the main mechanism for dealing with white power violence. This thread and the above tweet aren't an endorsement of any of them. It's a historical note. And here's what I think is interesting. First of all, criminal trials like in Greensboro after the shooting of leftist protesters in 1979 weren't working well at all. State trial acquittal, federal trial acquittal. That's because state criminal courts often sat all white or otherwise biased juries or gave jury instructions such as criminal convictions didn't happen over and over again in the face of overwhelming evidence. Same thing in this seditious conspiracy case. So civil suits did more to stem the tide of white power because they were able to get things through consent decrees that messed up the ability to organize. Money, no contract orders, no contact orders between activists, stopping publication in newspapers. That all happened through consent decrees. Those are real stops. In the seditious conspiracy case, in contrast, they gave back the weapons after the not guilty verdict. This allowed the white power activists to keep on keeping on. One even started a journal called The Seditionist. They kept seditioning.
Yes.
So RICO's interesting because it's one of several tools that have historical resonance, as does the Ku Klux Act, which one commentator mentioned. In our present moment, we're seeing a much more broad and effective use of these tools against white power and authoritarianism. But RICO, civil suits, etc., of course, involve major and intense power. What we know from history is that the overwhelming majority of this power will not be directed against white supremacy, white men, whiteness, but instead against marginalized communities. And this is one of the reasons I'm concerned about expanding our domestic terrorism statutes. Of course, bombing something for the base, that's another group, should have the same penalties as bombing something for ISIS. It's all terrorism. But like many historians, I know this has gone the other way before. We know that expanding policing as our main mechanism is going to hit communities of color. So as far as the white power militant right threat, I'm interested in RICO, but in other paths as well. And just one more point, I came back to add the seditious conspiracy charges are also working in the confrontation with white power today, as we can see from the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting mix, especially interesting if you bring in some of the historical perspectives here.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I could see how her first comment could get her taken to task. What are you saying? We're post-racism now? What do you mean? It's dismantled the white power. It absolutely has not. Well, not in total, but a lot of people who went on trial who, I guess, for instance, the first instinct might be for people to say, what are you even talking about? This must be small potatoes. I never heard of the order. Yeah, you didn't. And the reason is you would have. They would be the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers of today, but for the fact that they were dismantled in the 1980s. Oh.
Well, but that's the thing. RICO's a powerful tool because look what Giuliani did back in the day when he was semi-honest, and look what he did to the mafia. And she says, yeah, but even before that, the same sort of idea was used to take down some white power groups, important ones.
Right, and mafia is not. I wouldn't count them out of white power groups. By the way, they're pretty overwhelmingly white and kind of racist. So,
yeah, but they'll take money from anybody.
Sure, they'll take money from them, but then they'll also kill you worse.
Here's an Atlanta Journal-Constitution trying to step back and make some sense of everything that happened this week.
That's a good idea.
Okay. Oh, and by the way, is this a Thursday? It's a Thursday.
It is.
U.S. jobless claims applications fall as labor market continues to show resiliency. Good for you, Joe Biden. Bidenomics is working. Back to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Yes.
How Georgia became Donald Trump's Waterloo.
Georgia.
And, she talks about Patricia Murphy, the columnist, talks about the importance of what happened in Georgia. And she says, the full indictment illustrates the choice Georgia Republicans had to make under withering pressure from the former president to either stand up to Trump or go along with him, even if it was bad for the party, bad for the country, bad for them personally, or all of the above. And incredibly, Republicans have the same choice today.
Okay.
Still beating the drum about the Georgia elections and now the indictment, Trump posted a note to his social media platform Tuesday promising he'll soon present a large, complex, and irrefutable report. We now know that's in question, whether he'll actually do that. That will finally prove fraud in Georgia and fully exonerate him. And one more time, it was Kemp, the Republican governor, who shut him down. The 2020 election in Georgia was not stolen, Kemp wrote in his own social media post. That was on Twitter. The governor pointed out that in 3 years, no valid evidence of fraud has ever been presented under oath in a Georgia court, and he implored Republicans to look ahead to 2024, when he has said he will still support Trump for president if he's the GOP nominee again. That's the most incredible part.
Yeah.
Mike Pence doesn't need to be asked about whether or not he did the right thing on January 6th. Mike Pence needs to be asked, if Trump is the nominee, will you support him? Every one of them needs to go on record. Given the indictments, you're still supporting him. Yes or no?
Yeah.
And, of course, that's the problem. They have this debate coming up.
Yes.
They're all going to be there.
Right.
It's on Wednesday, I think, of next week.
Yeesh. Okay. I'm busy.
Well, you know who's busy?
Who?
Is Trump going to show up?
I don't know. He's raising money for veterans.
Trump has to turn himself into the Fulton County Jail. The debate is
he's got
Wednesday.
2 days after that.
He has to turn himself in by Friday.
Right.
What are the odds that he turns himself in during the debate? I'm sorry, we have to cut away from the debate for Donald Trump's motorcade going toward the Fulton County. I mean, isn't that going to happen?
That's a thought. He might want to do that. I mean, it does.
Of course, he wants to do that.
He doesn't want to turn himself in
Kevin
early.
Cruz said, this is Atlanta.
Jail,
we should celebrate Deion Sanders playing baseball and football on the same day. Maybe Trump will show up for the indictment, fingerprinting and mugshot in the afternoon, and then show up for the debate that evening and pull a double.
Or I was saying, if the
deadline
was Wednesday, could be. I mean,
or maybe he'll just do it during. I think he'll do it during, so all the cameras will be pointed on him.
Right, or he'll debate for a little while and then say, "I have to go." It's really it would work. I mean, he's not going to be thrown in the clink at the moment that he shows up. So I mean, he'll get back out. So why not just do it a couple days early and do it during the debate? Although I think it would be even funnier if he shows up for the debate and then he says a few things, yells at a few people, and then says,
looks at his watch,
"I'm going to get arrested now.
I'm due at the Fulton County Jail. Bye."
Where is the debate physically? Where are they holding it?
I don't know.
Me neither. I haven't looked at it because I'm just not that interested. I'll read about it afterwards. I'm just not going to.
But it doesn't matter because, as the sheriff in Fulton County Jail said, we're open 24/7.
Right. They should send somebody to
So
the
it
debate.
could be in Seattle, and he could still get to Atlanta for his indictment.
You know what I was? You remember his favorite stunt of inviting special guests to the debate and seating them in the front row to try and unnerve his opponents, right? Yeah. Chris Christie should invite the Fulton County Sheriff's Office to the debate and sit him in the front row and just say, if you're not busy afterwards, a free ride if you want. These guys will take you.
Someone said that about Lindsey Graham. Lindsey, if you want to keep getting closer to Trump, why don't you just volunteer to be a Fulton County jail guard?
Right. Possible good.
It's the best way to get close to him.
It will be at some point. Somebody's got to sit there and
Supporting him won't do it. He doesn't support you.
Yeah. Oh, that's for sure. Although he did get to go play golf once at the Virginia golf course. Right. That is something.
All right, so another few details between now and the end of the hour. I told you we had a lot. There's a lot going on.
I told you we had a lot. So there.
Yeah, well, I told you before you told me, before you told me that I told you. Understanding the role of Burt Jones, lieutenant governor, in the January 6th story, said Robert Costa, has long been of interest to me, especially because he was with Pence on the eve of the insurrection, when Pence was under intense, constant pressure from Trump and allies.
That's interesting.
And I told you that Burt Jones wasn't indicted because it turns out he went to court and said, Fani Willis can't charge me because she is interested in the campaign of my opponent. He's the one that brought the suit that the court agreed that Fani Willis can't charge him, and that's why there's a special state agency moving ahead with plans that will determine whether Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones faces criminal charges as part of a scheme to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
I can't believe that worked. But,
and of course, well, it did.
It shouldn't.
And this is another note from Georgia, Bentley Gregg, a lawyer down there.
Yeah.
Mark Meadows' removal drew Judge Jones, who is a Obama judge. If I'm Willis, I'm tempting not to fight the removal. She drew a great judge for her case who would also give her some argument of simply seeking justice and not trying to tilt the field. Okay. So that's, sort of interest. That's the local Georgia stuff. What's also interesting is the question on the table, and we tried to answer it for Jack Smith's 6 co-conspirators, unindicted co-conspirators.
Oh, yeah.
Or as they say in Georgia, unindicted co-conspirators whose identity is known by the grand jury.
Yes, they say that everywhere, but okay.
Unmasking the co-conspirators in Trump's Georgia indictment. Trump's latest indictment includes 18 co-defendants and 30 unindicted co-conspirators. Here's our attempt at figuring out as many as possible. This comes from the Daily Beast, but there's a similar effort done by Just Security. They're both very good. And the point is, there are some very familiar names. For example, Individual 1 in Georgia appears to be Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch.
Oh, okay. He gets a chance to be Individual 1, not just Trump.
First identified by Just Security co-editor-in-chief Ryan Goodman as the likely identity. Here's how the indictment describes Individual 1. I won't do this for all of them, but it gives you an idea of how the sleuths get together here.
Yeah.
On or about the 4th day of November 2020, Donald John Trump made a nationally televised speech falsely declaring victory in the 2020 presidential election. Approximately 4 days earlier, on or about October 31st, 2020, Trump discussed a draft speech with unindicted co-conspirator number 1, whose identity is known to the grand jury, that falsely declared victory and falsely claimed voter fraud. The speech was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. That matches material the January 6th Congressional Committee released last year revealing that Tom Fitton had written the draft speech and emailed it to Trump via 2 aides on October 31st.
Okay.
Dear Mr. President, the email begins, please see below a draft statement as you requested. As you requested.
Yes. Not good for him.
Individual 2, unknown but a fake elector. Individual 3, Boris Epstein.
Hey.
The indictment describes an attendee at Rudy Giuliani's infamous November 18th hair dye and sweat streaked press conference at the Four Seasons, where he was joined on stage by Jenna Ellis and Sidney Powell. Epstein, a senior Trump campaign aide and legal advisor, was part of that press conference.
Yeah.
Individual 4, Robert Sinners, one of the most salient alleged co-conspirators in the entire indictment, appearing in more than a dozen separate overt acts. But that alleged co-conspirator, Robert Sinners, the Trump campaign's Election Day operations chief, has since taken a post with an institutional bulwark that brooked some of the most severe abuse and violent threats while holding the Trump team's anti-democratic efforts at bay, the office of Georgia's GOP Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. So that's interesting. Sinners is readily identifiable from the indictment. According to the document, indicted co-conspirator David Schaefer, the former chair of the GOP in Georgia, sent individual for an email on November 20th, and that email stated the indicted Georgia bail bondsman Scott Hall had been looking into the election. Scott Hall is in this too. Individuals 5 and 6. Bernie Kerik is number 5, and number 6 appears to be a guy named Phil Waldron.
Not me. Yeah.
Waldron, the supposed individual 6, told Washington Post he attended the November 25th meeting. He made the same claim separately to Vice, telling the outlet that Trump said his testimony in Pennsylvania earlier that day was great. Kerik, of course, confirmed his presence at the same White House meeting in an interview with the January 6th committee. Cassidy Hutchinson also corroborates their presence that day alongside Mark Meadows.
Okay.
So 5 and 6 are together during similar back-to-back presentations that Giuliani's team made days later to a group of Arizona GOP. So very, very wide-reaching. 7 is unknown. 8 appears to be Burt Jones. We talked about that. There's a GOP treasurer, former GOP treasurer named Josh Brannon, who's number 9. I'm telling you, the whole thing is the GOP. 10 to 19 are fake electors. 20 through 24 are unknown. 25 appears to be a guy named Doug Logan, the conspiracy-spinning CEO of Cyber Ninjas. 26, 27 unknown. 28, a guy named Jim Penrose, a former NSA officer turned Sidney Powell lackey.
Oh, boy.
He requested the Coffee County data. Individual 29 appears to be Jeffrey Lenberg. He accompanied Logan to Coffee County, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
And individual 30 appears to be Stephanie Lambert, an attorney associated with Sidney Catherine Powell and the Trump campaign, who was a party and correspondence between Penrose and Maggio, the Sullivan-Strickler COO. Not only was Lambert part of that exchange, she's a longtime attorney to Sidney Powell. Now she faces criminal charges in Michigan for allegedly gaining unlawful access to voting equipment in the Wolverine state on behalf of another Trump-linked prod. I think that's Antrim County, Michigan, but I'm not sure. An attorney for Lambert denied wrongdoing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, my client is brilliant and zealous.
All right.
Yeah, maybe a little too zealous. Not so brilliant.
I should say so. All right.
We're about done with the show. I just want to throw this in this morning. Matt Gaetz says Biden impeachment, a platform to tarnish the president before 2024, even if we don't have enough information to convict.
Sure. Go ahead and do it anyway.
Say the quiet part out loud, Matt. Yeah. Very helpful.
It was. It was also very helpful. I saw him photographed introducing Trump at an event somewhere in Florida, the two of them side by side. And both apparently the same height. I thought that was interesting because Matt Gaetz is 5'8". So I thought that was interesting. Trump is shrinking, everybody. All right. Thanks, Greg. See you next week. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg, filling every last second of the hour. Fantastic. There's a lot still untouched. Yeah, it was funny. We were joking afterwards. Like, oh, I hope that was coherent. And like, it doesn't really have to be coherent. We all understood it. You've got a lot of context working for you. And I suppose if this was, if we were trying to do a 1 hour elevator pitch, like we're stuck in an elevator for an hour and we're doing a pitch for our predictions for the 2024 election cycle, maybe it's not entirely coherent to outsiders, but to our small group, it made a lot of sense. And all of the polling was in a context of, all right, well, we've been talking about the polls and how wrong the polls have been for a long time and how, no matter what happens, there's still going to be 25% of the Republican Party who says nothing matters. And that's true, but that we should be reminded, as we frequently forget when it's stuff like statistics. We're astonished that 25% of anybody could still think that it was worth voting for Donald Trump. But then you're reminded, well, that just means that 75% are saying, no, not really. So, and although he's won on with narrow margins before, it doesn't work. You can't hold on to those narrow margins and win when giant swaths of your base are saying no. So that's the point he's been driving home since forever, and well worth it with new polling data out today. Okay, so let's see. Other things that we can share with you, and do we want to make it another wide-ranging exploration of everything that's going on, or be more focused? Well, let's see. I don't even know. But there are a couple of stories that I definitely want to put on the record that have been floating around. One, I just want to make note of. This one has nothing to do with what we usually spend our time on, but I know everybody's interested in things like this, and the wild stories that are being told about. Here's a great chance to intersect the wild stories told about AI and Chat GPT in particular, and the more political and issue that we're more at home with. There's an actual merger between those stories and the local Republican lunatics petitioning to remove books from the library, close entire libraries, attack CRT. So this is the intersection of CRT and GPT coming together. There's a real story that actually combines the two, and it's in Popular Science, which means it's just science. It's not politics, so you can't assail us for, if you're a Republican and somehow mixed up and listening to the show, you can't say they're being overly political. I'm just being a scientist, and a popular one at that. Popular Science, Andrew Paul reports school districts, a district anyway, has used Chat GPT to help remove library books. How would they do that? Is it write me a speech in favor of removing certain books from the library so I can speak to the local authorities about it? No. It's dumber than that. Faced with new legislation, that is to say legislation in Iowa, mandating, or I guess perhaps facilitating the removal of these books, the state legislature is freaking out about CRT or God knows whatever the current freak out is, and passing stupid, overbroad laws with no definitions in them. Get rid of the bad communist sex books. Do whatever you have to do. So how do you deal with something like that? Well, the task is overwhelming. They say, well, get rid of all the books with bad content in it. Okay, what's bad? I don't know. Which books have it? I don't know. So two different problems here. But basically, well, you've got a bunch of not only illiterate, but anti-literate people who know only that they've heard on their favorite radio show or from a blog somewhere or saw it on Twitter that there's bad stuff in books. Well, we got to get rid of that bad stuff. Yeah, and how do we do it? Well, we take charge and we start banning them one by one. We'll root them all out. Okay, how do you know which books have bad stuff in them? Sex and stuff like that. Or books where characters who are of different races do things that are positive. Well, we don't want anybody learning about that. Let's get rid of those too. How do you know which books they are? Because you don't read any books. And the answer apparently is, hey, I know, Chat GPT. So faced with this new legislation, Iowa's Mason City Community School District, the one in question here, has asked Chat GPT if certain books, quote, contain a description or depiction of a sex act. They're on the prowl for sex in books to get rid of, or maybe to get tips from, I'm not certain which. And we're going to root out all the sex so that the kids don't learn anything about sex in our schools because reasons. Okay, fine. How do you know which books have sex in them? And the answer is Chat GPT. One at a time. Every book gets fit in there. Does this book have sex in it? Yes, says Chat GPT. So they ban it. Now, of course, the underlying problem with the story that we all know from having followed the AI freak out is sometimes Chat GPT just makes stuff up and doesn't have any basis for anything. So what they may be doing is saying, Chat GPT, I am totally ignorant of the content of this book. But in some cases, somebody has hinted to me that it was too damn sexy and we had to get this book out of the library. Is this true? And Chat GPT, if it feels like it, says, yeah, sure, it's the sexiest book on the planet. And then you end up banning it. And in some cases, it's totally right. In some cases, it's totally wrong. But apparently, rather than read the books and say, damn it, I want to protect children from this, they want to protect themselves from it too. And also they can't read or don't like reading, and who wants to be bothered? And, you're not going to fool me, making me look at all that porn to decide what porn is. I'm going to ask a robot to do it. So here's the damn story. Against a nationwide backdrop of book bans and censorship campaigns, Iowa educators are turning to ChatGPT to help decide which titles should be removed from their school library shelves in order to legally comply with recent Republican-backed state legislation. PopSci. I like that. They're going with PopSci. Popular Science has learned. And by the way, it's kind of amazing. And I don't know exactly what the dynamics are here. The first thing that occurred to me is, well, the teachers are busy also telling all the kids, don't use ChatGPT. That's cheating. Don't use it. If I catch you using it, and apparently there's a way to, an app that'll let you find out whether somebody else used the other app to do it. And by the way, that's leading to a lot of false positives. So lots of people are being accused of cheating and using AI chatbots to write things that they did not do that. They just write like they're robots, and that's really, well, that might be your fault, teacher. But anyway, the teachers are busy telling everybody, don't use GPT because it's cheating, and it might not know what the hell it's talking about either. And so don't listen to it and don't use it. Okay, so what are you doing this afternoon? Oh, I'll be using ChatGPT to figure out whether books are too damn sexy for you kids or not. But the other dynamic in here may be, this is just teachers saying, well, the problem is that the Iowa State Legislature just said, yeah, all right, we heard about this thing on the radio. So, we're campaigning on this too. So we're getting rid of all the sexy books. Make sure there's no sexy stuff in all those books. Person to whom I'm delegating this responsibility. And by the way, then they also throw in there, I love the punitive measures they throw in there, like, and if you have a sexy book in your classroom, you're going to jail too, right? We're going to have a penalty in there. And so you hand that to the teachers, and the teachers are like, God, what the hell am I supposed to do? I have to review every book in the world, or at least every book in my classroom library, but maybe every book in the world, and find out if they're too damn sexy or not. And how am I going to get that done before September? And the only answer is ChatGPT. It's not that I think this is a good idea. It's that it's my only chance of not going to jail because of this stupid, poorly drawn law. Let's see if there's any illumination in this. According to an August 11th article in the Iowa State newspaper, which may have been written by Chatbot GPT, the Gazette, spotted by PEN America, who am I even talking about? PEN America. I don't know, but it's linked here. But who is PEN America? PEN, like PEN America is, what are they telling me here? Who's it's a Twitter account, and it says, we stand at the intersection of literature and human rights to protect open expression in the U.S. and worldwide. That's great. I'd have to go to their website to figure out what PEN America actually is. Maybe you know offhand. Not immediately relevant to the story, though. So we continue on. Oh, now I'm stuck in the Twitter thing. All right, back to the PopSci, if they'll allow me to get right back to it. So, according to an August 11th article in the Gazette, the Iowa State newspaper, and then spotted by PEN America, the Mason City Community School District recently removed 19 books from its collection ahead of its quickly approaching new academic year, the 2023-24 academic year. The ban attempts to comply with the new law requiring Iowa school library catalogs to be both, quote, age appropriate and devoid of, quote, descriptions or visual depictions of a sex act. So no, you can't put sex cartoons in there and get past the ban. Gotcha. Speaking with the Gazette last week, Mason City's Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Bridget Eastman, or it's E-X-M-A-N, or X-Man if you are a comics fan, I guess, argued it was, quote, simply not feasible to read every book and filter for these new requirements, which it isn't. I just don't know whether she's coming at it from the angle of this whole thing is stupid, or Well, I too am a sex pest and want to get rid of all of this stuff and be in everybody's business. It's just not feasible, though, to read so many damn books and understand and process them from a literary perspective and make a reasoned determination about which ones are too damn sexy. So I'll just use the computer. I can't tell which kind of person she is. Let's see if she unravels it for us. Frankly, we have more important things to do than spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to protect kids from books. Ooh, okay. Eastman tells Pop Sci via email. At the same time, we do have a legal and ethical obligation to comply with the law. Our goal here really is a defensible process. Okay, so I think I understand now where she's coming from. She thinks the law is kind of dumb, but she feels obligated to try to comply with it, and the only tool at her disposal is this, as opposed to, like, this, say, talking to librarians and asking, well, you're familiar with this book, what's in it? You know, but not everybody remembers anything, everything. And I suppose if one slips by, either by design or by accident, somebody could face penalties, and they don't want to, you know, put that on anybody else's shoulders, I guess. Okay. According to the Gazette, the resulting strategy involved compiling a master list of commonly challenged books, then utilizing a previously unnamed AI software to supposedly provide textual analysis for each title. Flagged books were then removed from Mason City's 7th through 12th grade school library collections and stored in the administrative center as educators await further guidance or clarity. So they're not burning them. That's nice. Titles included Alice Walker's The Color Purple, Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, Toni Morrison's Beloved, and Buzz Bissinger's Friday Night Lights. We are confident this process will ensure the spirit of the law is enacted here in Mason City, Eastman said at the time. Although I will say, I mean, if you couldn't get a group of teachers and librarians together to tell me, what do you remember about The Color Purple, The Handmaid's Tale, Beloved, did I say Beloved? Maybe? I don't know, actually. And Friday Night Lights. Any sex in those? Someone is going to be able to tell you yes, no on each one of those books. They're not obscure. Anyway, not that I read any of them, so I can't help you. I'm not a literary person myself. Anyway, we're confident this process will ensure the spirit of the law is enacted here in Mason City. It's not enacted, really, but okay. Eastman said at the time, when asked to clarify what software Mason City administrators harnessed to help with their decisions on supposedly sexually explicit material, Eastman revealed their AI tool of choice. We used ChatGPT. It says sick here. Is that wrong, or were they? I don't know. Anyway, to help answer that question, says Eastman, who believes Senate File 496's age appropriateness stipulation is pretty subjective, but the depictions or descriptions of sex acts filter is more objective. Okay. According to Eastman, she and fellow administrators first compiled a master list of commonly challenged books, then removed all we said this already, but okay, removed all those challenged for reasons other than sexual content. For those titles within Mason City's library collections, administrators asked ChatGPT the specific language of Iowa's new law. Does book, insert book name here, contain a description or depiction of a sex act? If the answer was yes, the book will be removed from circulation and stored, writes Eastman. OpenAI's ChatGPT is arguably the most well-known and popular, as well as controversial, generative AI program currently available to the public. Leveraging vast quantities of data, the large language model, or LLM, offers users extremely convincing written responses to inputs, but often with caveats regarding misinformation, accuracy, and sourcing. In recent months, researchers have theorized its consistency and quality appears to be degrading over time. And that, I think, from what I understand from the popular discussion of it, is that it's being trained with what content there is available on the internet. So, I mean, actually, if most mentions, I suppose, on the internet of those books are, we got to get rid of them because they're full of porn, then it's going to be convinced that the answer that they're looking for here is yes, even though it hasn't actually scanned the content of the book in any way. It's just reading other people saying that they're porny and spitting that back at you, I think, if I understand what's going on correctly. It took me a while to catch up onto all of this AI stuff with ChatGPT, and I was always like, why are they always messing with people who hold master's degrees of, Master of Letters? Or I don't understand this obscure master's degree that they're attacking, the LLM. But it turns out it's large language model, not anything else. Okay. Anyway, so upon asking ChatGPT, do any of the following books or book series contain explicit or sexual scenes, AI's program offered PopSci a different content analysis than what Mason City administrators received. So it depends which bot you ask and how. Of the 19 removed titles, ChatGPT told PopSci that only 4 contained explicit or sexual content. Another 6 supposedly contained mature themes, but not necessarily explicit content. The remaining 9 were deemed to include primarily mature themes, but little or no explicit sexual content. Too bad, because they've all been banned anyway. Regardless of whether or not any of the titles do or do not contain said content, ChatGPT's varying responses highlights the troubling deficiencies of accuracy, analysis, and consistency. A repeat inquiry regarding the Kite Runner, for example, gives contradictory answers. In one response, ChatGPT deems Khaled Hosseini's novel to contain little to no explicit sexual content. Under a separate follow-up, the LLM affirms the book does contain a description of a sexual assault. I don't know whether it does or doesn't. You read it. Tell me. Eastman tells PopSci that even with ChatGPT's deficiencies, administrators believe the tool remains the simplest way to legally comply with the new legislation. Governor Kim Reynolds signed off on the new bill on May 26th, giving just 3 months to comply. And I guess this is the actual response at some point. Realistically, we tried to figure out how to demonstrate a good faith effort to comply with the law with minimal time and energy. That's good way of putting it. When using ChatGPT, we used the specific language of the law. Does the book contain a description of a sex act? Being a former English teacher, I have personally read and taught many books that are commonly challenged, so I was able to verify ChatGPT responses. That's good. With my own knowledge of some of the texts. Thank God for that. After compiling the list, we ran it by our teacher librarian, and there were no books on the final list of 19 that were surprising to her. For now, educators like Eastman are likely to continue receiving new curriculum restrictions from politicians hoping to advance their agendas. Despite the known concerns, the rush to adhere to these guidelines could result in a continued utilization of AI shortcuts like ChatGPT. So an interesting intersection of 2 threads of interest to, I hope, to our listenership. Okay, and I'm just thinking I should be checking in on the various ways that people can contact us and alert us to stories or make comments on them as they're going on. It looks like we're in the clear here. Okay. Let's see. Let me jump back into Pocket and choose another direction for the time being. There are plenty. And I think maybe some of the other backgrounders and explainers are perhaps of some interest to us here. I mentioned a rather long read, and why not start it now and carry it over the break? Lawfare with an entry on what the heck happened in County Coffee, Georgia. Did I say County Coffee, Georgia? I meant Coffee County, Georgia, but maybe I'm talking about County Coffee, Ireland instead. I like the way they reverse things there. But Coffee County, what the heck happened that made me call it County Coffee in the old style? And I think we got the gist of it. We understand that, okay, well, there was some breach of the security of the voting machines because lunatics, at the urging of possibly Donald Trump, but almost certainly Sidney Powell, basically used their authority as local Republican elected officials in charge of the custody of these machines to say, go ahead, have a field day. And with so many unindicted co-conspirators and so many new names coming onto the roster here, I thought it might be wise to read through one of these things. We have a New York Times or Washington Post retelling of it, but Lawfare tends to get weedy, and in this case, I think I like it, and it's worth spending some time on. If we're not going to just read the indictment in whole, let's get at least into the weeds in this part, which is probably the part of the conspiracy least known to most of us. So Anna Bauer wrote this thing for Lawfare, which is described in the subheader here as a detailed look back at the computer intrusion that features prominently in Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis's election interference indictment. Better get started. Shortly before noon on January 7th, 2021, with the nation still reeling from the aftermath of the attempted insurrection in Washington, D.C., a Republican Party official ushers a computer forensics team, into an election office in far away, from D.C. anyway, Coffee County, Georgia. According to a combination of court filings, depositions, and subsequent litigation, and the indictment filed Monday evening in Fulton County, the forensics team, a group of employees of an Atlanta-based firm called Sullivan Strickler, has driven into the rural South Georgia town of Douglas at the behest of lunatic Sidney Powell, a lawyer working with then-President Donald Trump's legal team. They are joined by a man named Scott Hall, that's the bail bondsman, and Republican poll watcher who flew down separately from Atlanta. So how far away is Coffee County? The answer is you got to fly there from Atlanta. That's inside Georgia. I mean, state's big, but it ain't that big. But anyway, I guess it's easier to get there. Kathy Latham, a public school teacher, oh boy, and chairwoman of the Coffee County GOP, escorts the group inside because love breaking laws. There, they are welcomed by two local elections officials, Misty Hampton and Eric Cheney, Chaney, and a former member of the elections board, Ed Voiles. Video surveillance detailed in the litigation shows what happened next, which was this. Over the course of several hours, the forensic team handles, scans, and copies the state's most sensitive voting software and equipment. All of this takes place without authorization from any court of law. The Elections Board will later claim it did not authorize the entry or copying, which the Georgia Secretary of State's office has referred to as unauthorized access to the equipment that former Coffee County election officials allowed in violation of state law. In other words, they said, well, we want to conduct a forensic audit of all the machines because we think there was systemic fraud, And everybody in charge of the machines said, everybody in charge of administering the law and interpreting the law said, no, you haven't given any showing whatsoever that violating the usual norm of keeping these under lock and key is warranted. But instead, the people who had the keys in Coffee County, because they were Republicans and they were believers in Donald Trump, they said, to hell with all of that. I will simply unlock the room and let you in. No court says this is okay, but I have the keys. So let's do this thing. Just like they said, well, I'm just going to forge electoral certificates later on. They just abused their power outright because they believed all of this nonsense. So, days before the forensics team sets foot in Douglas, which is about 130 miles southwest of Savannah, voters had arrived at the election office to mark their ballots in the state's runoff election for the U.S. Senate, a race that would tip the balance of power in the upper house of Congress. 2 months before that, some 15,000 people flocked to the polls in the rural county as Joe Biden and Donald Trump battled for the presidency. Later, in a recorded phone call entered as evidence in litigation, Hall would claim that the forensics group, quote, scanned every freaking ballot cast in those races. They scanned all the equipment, imaged all the hard drives, and scanned every single ballot, he will say in March of 2021. Throughout the month of January 2021, similar breaches occur on at least 3 other occasions, as additional outsiders are again given access to the state's voting equipment. Forensic copies are subsequently accessed by more than a dozen individuals across several states, the court records show, because, of course, when they broke in and they stole this stuff, they didn't keep it to themselves because they're not professional or responsible people. And even if they were, they never should have had access in the first place. But they can't help blabbing, and they ended up putting up on the internet. You examine it and see if you find fraud, because we might be incompetent to do that. And then from there on, The horse is out of the barn at that point. Until Monday, no individual involved in the apparent breach in Coffee County had been held accountable. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, we'll use later on, has said that it has been investigating the matter for more than a year, prompting questions about the sluggishness of the investigation. An open records request submitted by Lawfare to Coffee County reveals that the GBI recently seized the desktop computer used by Hampton at the elections office more than 2.5 years after the breach. Meanwhile, at the federal level, there have been no public signs that the Justice Department or the Office of Special Counsel Jack Smith have taken any steps to investigate the events in Coffee County, despite calls for them to do so. A separate open records request submitted by Lawfare returned no responsive documents for subpoenas or other communications between Coffee County election officials and federal law enforcement authorities. A spokesperson for the Special Counsel's Office did not respond to a request for comment. Yet, just over 200 miles from Douglas in Atlanta, one prosecutor has taken a deep interest in the events in Coffee County. And here's a recounting of those events laid out here. But first, a 2-minute break, and then we'll get back into the narrative. But we'll give you an introductory paragraph, if we can, over the music. In her sweeping indictment handed up on Monday, the Coffee County breach features prominently throughout. Powell, Latham, Hall, and Hampton are all charged under the Mammoth Indictment's racketeering charge, which alleges that several of the defendants corruptly conspired to unlawfully access secure voting equipment and voter data. And they did more, too. We'll tell you about that after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. I guess we got to do some speed reading if we're going to get anywhere close to through the majority of this article, but it is important, I think. I have scanned the bulk of it, and ChatGPT says so, so let's keep on going. As we said in this big, sprawling indictment, Powell, Latham, Hall, and Hampton are all charged with the allegation is that several of the defendants, and these in particular, corruptly conspired to unlawfully access secure voting equipment and voter data and stole data, including ballot images, voting equipment software, and personal voter information. According to the indictment, the stolen data was then distributed to other members of the enterprise, including members in other states. In addition, Powell, Latham, Hall, and Hampton face charges of conspiracy to commit election fraud, counts 32 and 33, conspiracy to commit computer theft, that's 34, conspiracy to commit computer trespass, 35, conspiracy to commit computer invasion of privacy, 36, and conspiracy to defraud the state, 37. The broad outlines and many of the details of the events in Coffee County have been reported before, including by CNN, Washington Post, the AP, 11 Alive, in case you were interested, and others, all of which have reported on the breach itself and on some of the circumstances surrounding it. But the account presented in this article, based on public records, depositions, court filings, interviews, internal emails obtained by Lawfare, and the indictment handed up Monday. By the way, does everybody understand why that's handed up rather than handed down? We all like to say sometimes in the vernacular, the indictment is handed down, but it is in fact handed up. That is to say, from the jury foreperson up to the judge on the bench, elevated above everybody else. The indictment is handed up, not down. So anyway, just thought you would like to know that. Anyway, so according to all the accounts presented in this article and all of their sources, they now attempt for the first time to comprehensively detail the extent to which an group of election officials and Republican Party operatives, in many cases the same person, somebody who's a Republican operative who occupies a position as an elected election official in an area, how they, in this small rural county, won the ears of the president's top lawyers and operatives as they sought to discredit the national vote Trump had lost. He didn't lose it in Coffee County there. But I guess the real reason there's a connection between the Trump circle and these guys is the Trump circle is full of people theorizing that the election has been manipulated by electronic voting machines. And nowhere in any respectable jurisdiction will Republicans or Democrats in that area give the president's lunatic team access to the machines. So they had to look for a small rural county where the Republicans were loony enough to say, yes, I will allow you to come in here and break our machines. And it turns out that Coffee County, Georgia was the place. Well, one of several places, in fact. Anyway, as we left off saying it is the story of how, in the name of preventing election fraud, the big irony here, this group appropriated county election systems and in the process made voting machines there and elsewhere less secure against future attack, and came to be charged with conspiring to commit election fraud themselves. Every Republican accusation is a confession. Powell, Hall, Latham, and Hampton did not respond to requests for comment for this story. Cheney and Voiles, who are not charged in the indictment, also did not respond to requests for comment. And now on to the narrative. It was election night at the White House, and Donald Trump was on the brink of losing the presidency. The Fox News decision desk had just called Arizona for Biden, taking the Trump campaign by surprise. Votes around the country were still being counted, but the Arizona call marked a shift in the atmosphere at the White House, according to the testimony of former Trump aide Jason Miller before the Select Committee investigating January 6th. By the early morning hours, Miller said Rudy Giuliani, you know who that is, was, quote, definitely intoxicated and espousing conspiracy theories. They're stealing it from us, Giuliani told the president, according to Miller's testimony. Where'd all the votes come from? We need to go on and say that we won, Giuliani allegedly said. Where'd all the votes come from? Where did they find 80 million votes? Well, there's 300 and something million people in the country, about, most of them, a lot of them registered to vote. Yeah. Are there 80 million people in this country? Sure. Why not? Anyway, we need to go out there and say that we won. Some of Trump's closest advisors urged a more cautious approach, according to their testimony before the Select Committee. Bill Stepien, Trump's campaign manager, told him it was too early to call the race. Miller advised him to put off declaring victory until the campaign had a better sense of the numbers. Ivanka Trump encouraged her father to tell his supporters that the votes were still being counted. But Trump sided with Giuliani. Shortly before 2:30 a.m. on November 4th, the president delivered remarks from the East Room of the White House, which should have been illegal really under the Hatch Act, but okay, declaring victory as millions of votes were being counted, a presidential exemption from the Hatch Act. But you really shouldn't be doing that activity there in the White House. Anyway, but he's right away, November 4th, 2:30 a.m., this is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country, which took over the airports in 1776, as you know. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. I thought that was always a telling quote, honestly. I mean, it's a very Trumpy Trumpism. We were getting ready to win this election. It's like, what does that mean? Is that even English? Did the humans say that we were getting ready to win? And then he realizes, oh, that makes it sound like there was some doubt. Frankly, we did win this election. He corrects himself to say, I don't know. That seems very revealing to me, but I can't pinpoint exactly what it means. Anyway, in the days that followed, Trump surrogates began to appear on cable TV networks, parroting false or misleading claims about supposed voter fraud and other irregularities. The precise cause of the irregularities varied. It was suitcases full of ballots in one place. It was thousands of votes submitted by dead people. And didn't Hugo Chavez hack the voting machines, or were the Chinese thermostats to blame? You see how crazy some of this stuff gets? Those in Trump's orbit seemed convinced that the election had been stolen, yet no one seemed to know how, much less have any evidence to prove it. For many Trump supporters, a key target of suspicion and derision was Dominion voting systems. That calls for some dramatic music, no doubt. They are, of course, the Colorado-based company that makes election machines and software. On November 10th, Powell, a Texas attorney and conspiracy theorist on then-President's campaign legal team, appeared on Fox News with host Maria Bartiromo. Sydney, we talked about the Dominion software. She's a weirdo, too. Bartiromo said, I know that there were voting irregularities. Tell me about that. Powell didn't pause before answering. That's to put it mildly, she said. The computer glitches could not and should not have happened at all. That's where the fraud took place, where they were flipping votes in the computer system or adding votes that did not exist, she said, based on nothing. There was not and is not now any credible evidence of widespread irregularities or flipped votes for Joe Biden during the 2020 election, and Dominion has repeatedly denied that its machines were manipulated by Hugo Chavez or otherwise during the election. Earlier this year, Powell's exchange with Bartiromo was cited in a defamation suit Dominion brought against Fox News. The suit alleged that the conservative network had aired falsehoods about the voting machine company. In March, Fox settled the suit after a judge granted partial summary judgment to Dominion on the issue of falsity, writing that the evidence developed in this civil proceeding demonstrates that it is crystal clear, in all caps, crystal clear, that none of the statements relating to Dominion about the 2020 election are true. Wow. Womp womp. Even in the fog of Trump's post-election war, federal prosecutors allege that the Trump campaign had reason to believe that many of its claims about election fraud were unsubstantiated. Trump, prosecutors allege in a recent federal indictment, spread lies that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the election and that he had actually won. These claims were false, and the defendant knew that they were false. Indeed, an internal campaign memo dated November 12th debunked various claims about Dominion machines, concluding that the machines did not affect the final vote count. That same day, the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency released a statement from election security officials who called the 2020 election the most secure in American history. And it is noted thereafter, parenthetically, that Trump then fired the director of CISA, Chris Krebs, a week later, because he said the president's wrong. Still, in the early days after the election, the vanguard of Trump's post-election legal team, Powell, Giuliani, and Lin Wood, were unrelenting. They began to file suits to block the certification of the election in battleground states based on these fantastical and unsupported accusations of widespread fraud. Powell promised to release the Kraken of evidence, in apparent reference to, well, you know what the Kraken is. I don't really tell you about that. In mid-November, a network of Trump lawyers, I can't believe they paused to define Kraken. Anyway, in mid-November, a network of Trump lawyers, advisors, and election deniers decamped to, where did they go? Tomatley, maybe? Plantation? Is that the name, how he pronounces it? Who cares? Because it belongs to Lin Wood. It's Wood's sprawling estate in South Carolina. In addition to Wood and Powell, the individuals who assembled at this place during that time included well-known fixtures in the Trump cinematic universe. Funny. There was Michael Flynn, notorious spy in my estimation, the former national security advisor who had twice pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI and to whom Trump would grant a sweeping pardon in December of 2020. There was also Patrick Byrne, a prominent election denier, former CEO of Overstock.com, and former paramour, I forgot about this, of Russian agent Maria Butina. I had forgotten that entirely. But why not invite him too? Others who visited Tomatley were less prominent. The group included Jim Penrose, Greg mentioned him earlier, a former NSA official, and Phil Waldron, also mentioned by Greg. Who's he? A retired Army colonel with ties to Allied Security Operations Group, ASOG. I believe we read an article about them about a year ago. Anyway, the Texas-based cyber intelligence company, that's ASOG, run by former GOP congressional candidate Russell Ramsland, and Doug Logan, the owner of a cybersecurity firm called Cyber Ninjas. Dun, dun, dun. That clip is too long to play at this point. The team of Trump allies assembled in South Carolina took an early interest in getting, quote-unquote, forensic images, essentially digital copies of data and software of an electronic device, of voting machines, in order to support litigation, Logan said in a deposition, As a part of their legal strategy, in Georgia and other key states, Trump-aligned lawyers filed motions to access voting equipment for so-called forensic audits. In November, Wood filed an emergency motion in federal court in Atlanta seeking access to voting machines. The effort ultimately failed, as it did in virtually every jurisdiction in which the Trump campaign filed similar suits. There were, however, minor successes around the country and at least one major exception to the Trump campaign's string of legal defeats. Greg knows where it happened. Antrim County, Michigan. Fine. More dramatic music. Much like Coffee County, Antrim is a small, reliably Republican county of approximately 24,000 people that found itself embroiled in the president's efforts to overturn the results of the election. As the January 6th committee summarized the events, the origin of the fixation on Antrim began in the early morning hours of November 4th when an elections administrator in the county, Cheryl Guy, made an error while reporting the unofficial results of the election. Guy's mistake appeared to show Biden with a substantial lead over Trump, an unusual result, considering that Trump was widely expected to win the Republican stronghold. The result was swiftly corrected following an investigation by Guy, which determined that the root of the problem was human error in updating the election counting software. Trump, as expected, won Antrim County by a landslide. But by the time the error was corrected, the clerical mistake had spawned conspiracy theories about Dominion voting machines. Trump's team seized on the narrative, claiming that the incident in Antrim showed evidence that votes had been switched, as opposed to just making a mistake in programming. A local attorney in Michigan, Matt Gaetz, sued to get access to the machines. An Antrim County judge issued an order granting permission to the plaintiff's experts to make a forensic copy of the county's Dominion machines, as well as the computer system that tallied the votes, according to the committee. All very interesting, all very wrong and mistaken on the part of everybody who was participating, but at least they got a judge, a crazy judge who didn't know what they were doing, but they got a judge to give some stamp to it, some stamp of the imprimatur. They were working under color of law at that point, and in the positive sense. They had gotten a decision from a judge that allowed this. In Coffee County, apparently, I guess we'll see as they retell the story, they basically said, well, some judge somewhere, I don't know whether they even knew about Antrim County, but it didn't matter to them. They didn't bother asking, they just went. That was part of what makes the difference between the two. Not that they got out of trouble in Antrim County. They are indicted. To conduct the work, Powell signed an engagement letter worth $26,000 with an Atlanta-based firm called Sullivan Strickler that specializes in collecting forensic copies of computer systems or other electronic devices. Okay. Now, they're going to get them from Atlanta to Antrim County to do this work, apparently. In the Fulton County indictment, prosecutors allege that the unlawful breach of election equipment in Coffee County, Georgia, was subsequently performed under this same agreement. The firm and its chief operating officer, Paul Maggio, had been referred by Penrose, according to a November 19th email provided to Lawfare, in which Penrose writes that he has identified Sullivan Strickler, quote, to perform the work if needed in the near term. All right. Russell Ramsland, the former GOP congressional candidate turned cyber intelligence expert, subsequently conducted an analysis of the data on behalf of his company, ASOG. On December 14th, he released his report to the public. It included the baseless claim that Dominion machines had been infected with a malicious algorithm that manipulated the results of the 2020 election. Sure. Election security experts sharply rebuked the report and debunked its central contention that machines had been compromised. Independent experts for the Department of Homeland Security called it false and misleading. Later, a hand recount in Antrim would confirm, surprisingly enough, the results tallied by the voting machines. Still, the President of the United States hyped the report as proof of fraud. And here he is tweeting, "Wow," in all caps. This report shows massive fraud, election-changing result. And of course, it showed nothing of the sort. Despite the glaring flaws and baseless claims cited in the interim report, its release was a success for Trump, fueling a new wave of outrage among his base. On December 21st, 2020, the indictment alleges Powell emailed the chief operations officer of Sullivan-Strickler, instructing him to immediately send her team a copy of all data obtained by Sullivan-Strickler LLC from Dominion Voting Systems equipment in Michigan. But Antrim County wasn't enough. Trump's team needed more examples than just a single small county in a single state, which alone could not deliver the presidency. If Trump was going to overturn the election, his allies would need to find a way to access more machines. And remember, at this time, they are in the White House advocating for martial law and the seizure of all voting equipment across the country. But here's what they get instead. On a Tuesday morning in November, approximately 1 week after Joe Biden won the presidency, the Coffee County Elections Board gathered to discuss the outcome of the election. Misty Hampton, the administrator charged with supervising the county's elections, insisted on the integrity of her own process for adjudicating ballots in Coffee, where Trump won an overwhelming share of the vote. But according to the minutes of the November 10th board meeting, Hampton, who is identified as Ms. Martin in the minutes, and Misty Hampton, a.k.a. Emily Misty Hayes, in the Fulton County indictment. How is this person operating with 6 different names here? I don't know. Warned of the possibility that bad actors, who sometimes are identified with alternative names, could manipulate the state's voting machines, which were, like those in Antrim County, Michigan, made by Dominion Voting Systems. She described a process she called adjudication, which would in theory allow an elections administrator like herself to change votes on cast ballots. Adjudication occurs when there's some question about which candidate a person intended to cast his or her vote for. The process involves a review panel, usually a 3-person panel, including representatives from both the Republican and Democratic parties, that reviews the questionable ballots to determine the voter's intent. We saw this in like Palm Beach County, Florida in 2000, right? An elections administrator then inputs the decision of the panel into the electronic vote counting system. In Georgia, the process applies only to hand-marked absentee ballots, as other ballots are cast using Dominion machines. The integrity of the election depends on whether the human operator in charge of the adjudication process is an honest person, Hampton explained. But the honest person is not in every county. And of course, they may have different ideas of what honesty actually means. Eric Cheney, an elections board member, agreed with Hampton's assessment of the voting machines. Cheney, a second-generation used car salesman, sure, why not, called the Dominion system a piece of junk, which really, I guess, is supposed to mean something maybe coming from a second-generation used car salesman, but okay. He claimed that he didn't care who won the election, so long as the race was won in a fair manner. The minutes report that Cheney said it, all caps, sickens him to know that the machines could be used for fraud. Except they couldn't, so you're sick for nothing. Among those in the audience that day was Ed Voiles, who later described himself as a former member of the Elections Board who had resigned in 2018 after he refused to certify the results of the state runoff that saw Brad Raffensperger elected as Secretary of State. Now, Voiles urged the board to draft a letter to Raffensperger expressing its concerns with the system. Hampton suggested that Voiles, who did not hold any formal position on the board, could draft such a letter. Why? The board ultimately agreed to send the letter penned by Voiles. According to later deposition testimony, the letter dated November 11th claimed that the board had discovered, quote, deficiencies in the current Dominion election system. During the November 10th board meeting, Hampton created a video in which she purported to demonstrate how a rogue elections administrator could flip votes from Donald Trump to Joe Biden during the adjudication process. At one point, the video showed the password to the county's election management system server, which was displayed on a sticky note on Hampton's computer. The local news outlet uploaded the video to YouTube, where it racked up more than 250,000 views. That sounds dumb. Not good operational security, among other things. In Georgia, concerns around the integrity of the state's voting systems were hardly new and were not the exclusive concern of the Trumpist right. Back in 2017, the Coalition for Good Governance, a nonprofit devoted to election security activism, sued the Secretary of State on behalf of a Fulton County resident, Donna Curling. That suit, Curling versus Raffensperger, sought to compel state officials to switch from electronic voting machines to ballots bubbled in by hand. At the same time, the state used the Diebold machines, remember those? Made by a company called Elections Systems and Software, which provided no independent paper trail to verify the electronic vote count. In 2019, the federal judge overseeing the case, Amy Totenberg, ordered the state to retire its technologically outdated and vulnerable voting system ahead of the March 2020 primaries. In the wake of that ruling, the state ultimately settled on a different voting machine made by Dominion Voting Systems. The Curling litigation, however, was not over. In fact, it had continued because the plaintiffs are still concerned over the security of state election equipment. One result of the continued litigation has been depositions of many of the actors in the Coffee County saga, depositions that form the basis for much of this account. While there are genuine issues in dispute in Curling, the issue Hampton raised at that meeting is not one of them. Indeed, vote flipping of the type described by Hampton would likely have been discovered during Georgia's statewide audit later that month, which did not find widespread discrepancies in the vote tally. But in Coffee County, officials were convinced that the election had somehow been rigged, and they were eager to sound the alarm. The trio of Hampton, Cheney, and Voiles soon began to communicate with Trump staffers and associates. Following the November 10th meeting, Hampton reached out to Robert Sinners. Remember him? He was named earlier today. A Trump staffer focused on the campaign's post-election efforts in Georgia, urging him to request minutes from the Board of Elections meeting. Complying with that request, Sinners emailed Hampton, "I understand Coffee County voting systems were discussed in detail, and I would like to obtain as much information as possible under Georgia open records laws," he wrote. In a deposition, Sinners said that he then forwarded the minutes to the Trump campaign attorneys. Cheney, the used car salesman who earlier claimed that he didn't care who won the election, also reached out to Sinners. In an email to Sinners describing his concern with Dominion voting systems, Cheney wrote, in all caps, "This is the avenue for fraud on the largest scale imaginable," but was undetected by any audits. But okay, whatever. Anyway, a week later, Cheney asked Hampton to send him a bulletin that had been issued by the Secretary of State's office regarding the reliability of voting machines. "Trump's man wants them," he explained in a text message. "Thereafter, the SOS, Secretary of State, and Gov." "Good! I'll help them in any way I can," Hampton replied. "Me too," Cheney agreed. They'll help them go after the Secretary of State and the governor. Yeah, sure, why not? Days later, Georgia held a machine recount of its vote for a third time. Georgia's Secretary of State certified Joe Biden as the winner of the presidential election, but the Coffee County Board of Elections refused to certify its machine recount numbers, citing an, quote, inability to repeatedly duplicate creditable election results. Explaining its decision in a December 4th letter to Raffensperger, the Elections Board wrote that certification of patently inaccurate results neither serves the objective of the electoral system nor satisfies the legal obligation to certify the electronic recount. No word as to why they think it's wrong, just that they're asserting that they do. Any system, financial, voting, or otherwise, that is not repeatable nor dependable should not be used, the board told Raffensperger. The letter did not mention that the patently inaccurate results of the county's recount amounted to a 51-vote discrepancy with its election night tally, a sum that would have been far from sufficient to alter the outcome of the election in Georgia. Nor did the board specify how problems with the machines could have caused the difference between the counts. And it omitted a critical fact about what actually occurred during the electronic recount. That is that Hampton had told state elections officials that she was unsure whether she had scanned a batch of ballots twice. The Secretary of State's office launched an investigation which ultimately concluded that Coffee County's recount discrepancy resulted from human error. And I guess probably Misty Hampton's. But none of that seemed to matter to the president's lawyers. By December, Coffee County had captured their attention. The rural county best known for its peanut and cotton fields suddenly became a centerpiece of Trump's election efforts in Georgia. On December 12th, Kurt Hilbert, an attorney working as local counsel for the Trump campaign, filed suit in state court that sought to decertify the results of the presidential election in Georgia. The plaintiff in the suit was named Sean Still, who later became the secretary of Georgia's fake electors. The suit, which named both Raffensperger and the Coffee County Board of Elections, as well as individuals working for the Board of Elections as respondents, cited the board's refusal to certify the electronic recount and the November 11th letter that declared deficiencies had been discovered in the Dominion machines. Shortly before the suit was filed, Sinners and another Trump campaign attorney, Alex Kaufman, flew down to Coffee County from Atlanta, and the two collected affidavits from voters at a local steakhouse. Sure, why not? According to Sinner's recollection during the deposition. Later that month, references to Coffee County also cropped up in other Trump campaign documents, and we're starting to see something happen here. A strategic communications plan created by associates of Giuliani cited Hampton's video that purportedly showed how to manipulate cast ballots on Dominion machines. 2 executive orders, which would have directed the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security to seize Dominion voting system machines, were drafted. The draft orders included identical language noting that Coffee County had, quote, identified a significant percentage of votes being wrongly allocated contrary to the will of the voter, and that Coffee County, Georgia had refused to certify its result. Coffee County's vote counting woes may not have had merit, but they were useful. We got to leave it off at this point, and we're only moving on to section 3 of a very long article, but perhaps we'll continue with it tomorrow. You should certainly take a look at it, but you're beginning to see how this takes shape and how dumb people that don't understand the difference between, well, for one thing, evidence and proof, and not alone in that, don't understand whether they're looking at something as actually evidence of something at all or not, and then finally deciding, well, what we really need here is that the claim be made. That's what the Trump campaign is interested in. Hey, they're alleging fraud. They're completely wrong and baseless, but they're alleging it, and we need to look into it. And then things snowball from there. All right. Well, speaking of having things snowball from there, our show snowballed quite a bit, and there are a number of things that we didn't get to today. But we're always backed up by Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as we are today. And let's see if we can pull out some tidbits to tease you with right after this.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here we go. He's got to get into this for us. The local Kansas prosecutor behind the controversial police raid on the Marion County Record has agreed to withdraw the search warrant and return items taken from the newspaper. How do you like that? For a new development in that case, we got to turn our attention to that. Justice Putnam will do it next, among other things, right here on Netroots Radio.